2 words, Revo Fitness. Here's a few more. Simple, 24/7, reformer Pilates, body scanners, massage chairs, squat racks, free weights, pin and plate loaded equipment, no lock-in contracts, no bullshit. All of that and more from just $9.69 a week. That's surprisingly affordable. Join now at Revo Fitness Blair Athol or download the Revo Fitness app. RevoFitness.com.au or find the Revo Fitness app in the App Store.
Welcome to Do Data Better. I'm Sean Aylmer, host of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. In the digital age, there's more data than ever before. It's collected by companies and government departments in every interaction and every transaction. But how many companies are actually using the data to its full potential? Have you ever wondered just how much more you could be doing with it and the benefits to your business of using that information? Today, I'm joined by 3 leading actuaries who work in major Australian data science businesses. Adam Driussi is co-founder and CEO of Quantium. Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Jonathan Cohen is principal at Taylor Fry. Good morning, Jonathan.
Hi, Sean.
And Rick Shaw is a partner at Deloitte. Thanks for your time, Rick.
Yeah, no worries.
Righto, let's jump into it. Big data, even the word data, can be overwhelming to many people, to businesses that don't really understand it. In a sentence or two, got to dumb it right down, can each of you tell me what we're talking about in this podcast today? What is it that data can do for business? I'm going to start with you, Adam. You got the first intro. You get the first question.
Sure. I mean, I guess in a nutshell, if you think back to like the early days of a shopkeeper running a retail store, you'd walk into a local shop and the person would know your name and they'd know what you're into and they'd know the sorts of things you want to buy. And data is the modern way of doing that, where large companies can deal with lots of customers but understand them in a detailed way, so they can actually give customers a personalised experience by understanding their preferences and who they are as individuals. And so when we talk about big data, I really think we're talking about an age where there's lots and lots of data being collected now compared to in the past. So with all of that data comes great opportunities to do that better for customers.
Okay, you had first mover advantage there, Adam. Jonathan, have you got something to add to that?
I'd say Adam did a pretty good description there. I'd say the one comment I'd add is that it certainly extends beyond sort of retail and customer-facing businesses through to areas like government and health. Record lots of data and lots of opportunity there also.
And Rick?
Like what my friend said, I would just challenge the framing of the question a little bit, in the sense that I think it's what we want to do, and it's kind of the actuarial role, is ensure that we have these wonderful, great tools, and as Adam says, we can personalise the way we interact with people. I would just frame it as not see business as something separate from society. How can we use these great tools for the betterment of society generally?
Okay. So we've talked about the data age for a long time. It's been branded all sorts of things. The new oil, I think at one point, was what The Economist called it. Yet we haven't quite realised its potential, be that in business right through to bettering society, as Rick put it. Why is that? Or is it just a progression and we're doing pretty well and it will just continue on this spectrum for a while? So, Adam, I'll go back to you on this one.
Yeah, sure, Sean. Look, I think the short answer is because it's not easy to do. It requires a lot of thought and hard work to think about how to transform the way a business operates or a government makes decisions and so on. So it requires not just the right data and how, capturing more and more data, but also having the right tech platforms in place, being able to build the right team with the right capabilities technically and so on. Each of those in their own right are challenging. But most importantly, I think it also requires the right culture within an organisation or a government, whatever it might be, to be willing to reimagine the way that they do things and change. And that's not easy. So I would say there's a number of great examples out there where businesses and governments have done that, but there's still a hell of a lot of potential where that can be done even better by more companies and more governments in more areas of decision making.
Okay, we'll get to those examples in a moment, but Adam, just continuing what you're saying there, where are we in the evolution of data? Are we at the beginning? Are we kind of an adolescent? Are we further down the track, do you think?
I think we're an adolescent, but you could argue we're at the beginning as well. So, I mean, from a personal point of view, I started my business Quantium 20 years ago. And I can tell you 20 years ago, if you were trying to talk to companies about their data, it was they would take the meeting because it was a novelty. You know, someone wanted to talk to them about their data. They would say, no one's ever asked me to talk about my data before. I'll take the meeting to see what you're on about. These days, every boardroom of every business would be talking about data and how they can use data to make decisions better and how they can be responsible around data and data security and so on. But I think a lot of businesses are still scratching the surface of realising those opportunities. So I'd say the awareness is there, and now it's a case of which businesses can really, and which governments and so on can really capitalise on the use of that data, and that is still relatively early in its infancy for the mainstream.
Okay, Jonathan, and then I'll bring Rick in on this one as well. How do you approach the problem, the challenge? As Adam said, we have boards everyone's talking about data, but I would say there'd be a lot of businesses out there who are really struggling with what's the first step? What do we do? How do we think about this? So just kind of the very first principles, Jonathan, for companies to think about data.
Yeah, I think for me, if businesses are thinking of how to use data, they've really got to think about what's the business problems they have and what's the strategic objectives that they're trying to achieve. There's often a temptation to say, lots of other organizations are using data, we've got to use data, and you start up these big projects where you spend years and years building, whiz-bang data systems, but that might not actually be relevant to your business. It might not actually address any of the strategic objectives that you've got. So I think the starting point has to be, what is it that we're trying to achieve? What are we facing as a business? And then you can start to think through, are there opportunities for us to leverage data, either ours or external data in some way to address those issues?
Okay, Rick, I want to bring you in. I'm interested in your take on that as well, and whether you are seeing businesses increasingly do that or not.
Absolutely. We are at an exciting time in the development of data and analytics to make businesses and society better. These tools are really powerful, and in that sense, they're really scary. And I think we have a two cultures problem in the field a little bit. We have all the technical geniuses who just love building algorithms and doing the really technical work. And separate to that, we have the people who look into the ethical considerations of issues. And I talk to a lot of large corporations in a number of industries who do B2C. And the people who are responsible for the activities have little visibility of what's going on in the algorithm. They appear to be black boxes. And that two cultures thing is a thing that personally I think there's a role for the actuarial profession there, which we'll talk about in a minute, to do what we've done in other areas of ensuring that these great, powerful tools are being used for the betterment of society, which, and I'm here, what's in my mind is some of the issues that came up in the Financial Services Royal Commission, where the interests of an organisation could be seen as not focusing on what's the best outcomes for its customers.
Okay, so I might just stick with, actuaries generally are mathematically adept, and I would have thought strategic thinkers. Where I'm getting to here is, where do actuaries fit into this whole data process? Where can they best be used?
Where I think we fit is we have a complex instruments being applied by big business and government to individuals. So the Robo-Debt Royal Commission, which is going on at the moment, is a good example of what happens when things go wrong. So what have we as a society have had complex systems where the outcomes are quite important? What we've done is we've referred to experts to sort of represent the conflicting interests of business and government and the people. And I think here of, say, engineers. Like, we all cross the Sydney Harbour Bridge or any of the bridges without second thought as to whether the bridge is strong enough to hold us. And that's because an engineer has made sure that the bridge is strong enough. And we as a society rely on the professionals, the engineers in this case, to make sure the bridges are strong enough. Similarly, in the sort of the intangible world of financial services, society relies on the actuary to make sure that our financial institutions act well and appropriately towards customers and that they are financially robust. I think the complexity of the problems here means that reliance on a professional body to represent the interests of society and the corporations and government is the approach we should take. And that's why I think, say, in the intangible world, the actuaries have a role, and in the tangible world, the engineers have a role around algorithms and data.
Yeah, Adam, Jonathan, do you have anything to add to that in terms of the role of actuaries?
I'll have to take maybe a slightly different perspective to Rick. If I think about, certainly say, the data science projects that we work on within our business with a lot of clients and so on, if I think about the mix of skills on those projects, typically any given initiative requires a kind of a diverse team of people that come together with different backgrounds and skills. And so if I think about that, typically when you're handling large volumes of data, we would use engineers for that task. So you use engineers where they are highly skilled at taking massive volumes of data and being able to process that data, really efficiently, really quickly and accurately and so on. Where we typically use actuaries or other quant type resources and skills and highly quant people would be to think about how you frame the problem and what it is you're trying to solve, and then perhaps how you build the complex models to solve that problem. But then we'd also surround them if required with maybe management consultants who really understand an industry initiative, potentially designers, UX design people that can really think about, if I'm building a tool here for the business to use, what's the really optimal way to design something that customers want to interact with and so on. So I think actuaries have a real role to play, but it's not a contractual need. There's no need why it has to be an actuary, but we find that actuaries tend to have the right skill sets to solve that middle bit of solving the problem and then building some of the complex models.
Anything to add?
I sort of was going to say there's probably three areas that we get involved with, as actuaries working in data science. One is what Adam touched on, is having someone that can take a strategic or a business problem and turn it into something that can actually be solved quantitatively, which in some ways is kind of the most important step in actually getting something that works. There's often sort of systems that get built that don't actually address the business need. The second area is measuring the effect of making those changes. So when you develop an algorithm or deploy a new system, you're typically doing it because you want to improve your business in some way. And so there's a question around, did it actually have an impact on the business? Was the impact what you thought it would be? And are those changes sustainable? And you can get into sort of more complicated questions. Well, were the impacts sort of different for different customers or different patients? Were there some people that worked really well for and made improvements and some that it didn't? So which is the second area of measurement. And the third area is governance. So increasingly, there's a lot of risks that are introduced through algorithmic decision making and personalization and all those areas in which data is being applied. How do you as an organization set up governance and risk management frameworks to ensure that A, you're actually aware of what those risks are, and B, that you're managing them and monitoring them appropriately, because otherwise, you might find yourself in quite a bit of strife.
Yeah. Okay. Jonathan, I'm going to stick with you. On that basis, are there some I think it was Woolworths boss Brad Banducci who said there isn't a single important business process that couldn't be improved through the intelligent application of data. I'm sure he's right. But are there some problems that just lend themselves better to data-driven strategies than others?
Yeah, I'd say it's sort of probably taken to its limit that'd be true, and the same as saying, anything could be improved by a computer. You can kind of think of ways that it applies. I think in terms of areas that are better served by data, there's sort of a few points. One is relevance. So is it relevant to your business and what you're trying to achieve? Do you actually have the data? Do you have sufficient scale, both in the data and in the business problem, for this to make an impact? And do you have the ability to execute? So what you don't want to do is end up with something that's just a PowerPoint deck that lies in someone's computer. Can you actually execute on it and make a change? The other area that really helps to make sure that something that you develop has an impact is in part technical and part sort of cultural, and that's around a mindset of experimentation and test and learn. So a lot of the time when you're developing these systems, you don't know if it's going to work, and you don't know how it's going to, you don't know what thing you're going to do is going to work. And so it's really important that you don't sort of lock yourself into saying, oh, we know exactly what the strategy is going to be. We're going to implement it. We've got a business case that says, $1 trillion in EBIT is going to flow from doing this. Making sure that you're experimenting with what you're doing, testing, learning what works and improving that way. There are some areas that are really hard to crack with algorithmic approaches and AI. So health is a really good example of that, where you have a lot of stakeholders and ethical issues. And several of the big tech firms, Microsoft and Google, for instance, have tried and failed to enter into the health market. So there are significant barriers there.
Okay. What I want to do is ask each of you to now give me an example. Maybe you've worked on the strategy, maybe you've implemented it, maybe you've just heard about it, where data strategy or data has really helped a business or disrupted a market or something like that. I'm kind of looking for real life examples so I can, as a non-expert in this area, can identify with what you're talking about.
I'll start off. We're doing extensive work with a number of financial services organisations which are automating decisions that impact people, say, around the mortgage approval process or the premium rating within an insurer. And our approach to this work is we set the framework for the actual technical analysis and the governance reporting and all that. What we're tending to do more and more is to ensure that the algorithmic outputs are consistent with corporate and social objectives. So what we're doing is making the black box of algorithms a glass box. And so we develop governance systems where there's human ownership of the algorithmic output. Because the framing here is that the algorithm is only ever an input into a decision-making process. A human always makes a decision. And we're doing a lot of work in that area of bringing transparency to the algorithmic processes.
Okay. Adam, what about, you work with a lot of very large Australian corporates. Do you have an example where data has really made a difference in one way or another?
Yeah, sure. I've got a few. I'll try and keep it short. So if you think about something like a supermarket, like a Woolworths or any supermarket, frankly, when you walk down a supermarket aisle, there are all sorts of decisions that humans have had to make over the years around what things they put in the aisle. As an example, how much of a store do you dedicate to soft drink? And then within that soft drink, where do you place the soft drink? And do you put Coke Zero next to Diet Coke next to Diet Pepsi, or do you put all of Coke next to each other, all of Pepsi next to each other, and so on? So you've got decisions around how much of a store you allocate to certain products. You've got decisions around how you price those products. So do you make a product 50% off? Do you make it 2 for 1? What sort of promotions do you have? And they're massive decisions for retailers and suppliers. So just a simple thing like those promotions, I think retailer and suppliers collectively invest about $6 billion a year just in a Woolworths in promotions. So there's really big decisions that humans make where, if you think about it, you've got a lot of data understanding how customers are actually interacting in individual stores and how they're buying those products, where you can use that data to better tailor the experience for customers to make sure you've got the right products on the shelf so that when they walk into a store, there's not their favourite item missing and so on. So you need forecasting algorithms to actually predict how much of every item you're going to sell every day, depending on what price you've set, so that you can deliver the right amount of stock to stores to get on the shelf and so on. And all of those things can be done better with data and analytics. And I would say they're all of those things I just mentioned are problems that we work on with retailers around the world to help transform the way that they make sure they're getting the right products on shelves to customers when they need it.
Okay. Have you got another example before I throw to Jonathan?
I'm happy to give you another one. So during COVID, so for example, we did a lot of work with the federal government around analytics supporting decisions the government were making around COVID. I can't go into too much detail because the details are confidential. But if you think about that phase of of our lives, there was a lot of decisions that government was needing to make in very short time, and I'm proud to say the government did use data to make a lot of those decisions. So every day it was literally day by day. We need this information today to be able to make a decision about what we do here. So simple example, we've got a limited supply of PPE equipment, or we've got a limited supply of vaccines early on. How can we work out where to distribute it to have the greatest impact and mitigate risk as much as possible? So we were doing work with the government there to help with that. In that case, it was the federal government. We're also doing some of the work with the state governments as well. But really important work where you can use data to make quicker and better decisions that were really important, otherwise going to be done by gut feel.
Jonathan, examples where data has made a difference.
Yeah, I've got a couple of examples also. I'll go with something concrete and on the same theme as Adam. So again, sort of during COVID, we did work with the Sydney Local Health District and New South Wales Health, who built the vaccination hub at Olympic Park, which administered something like 500,000 vaccines over a 3-month period at a peak operating rate of about 10,000 vaccines a day. So the challenge there was to set up some sort of data analytics framework so they can know what's going on. And we also developed what's called sort of a digital twin simulation. So we had a simulation model of the centre itself so that the operational team could look at questions like, what happens if we change the number of pharmacists or the number of nurses or change the queue structure, and how can we improve throughput and reduce the length of queues and make the whole process more resilient. So that was really cool because it was very concrete. You can kind of see the changes. You're talking to operational people and having to do things very quickly. So it also sort of highlighted how within a matter of weeks, you can establish an analytics framework that delivers sort of actual value to an issue, because you've got sort of a razor focus on the thing you need to do in a very limited time frame to do it in. I've got another example, somewhat more abstract, but we do a lot of work in the social services sector, so government welfare systems, and sort of the first global example of that was 10 or 15 years ago. We worked with the New Zealand government to restructure the way in which they administer social welfare. So historically, it was based on sort of annual appropriations. And the question was, well, can we change that to say, well, let's work out who has the greatest need over their lifetime and where we can put the money to improve outcomes the most over a long period. So running things much more, in a sense, how an insurer would run their business. And so we've worked with the New Zealand government for the last, 10 or 15 years on building lots of statistical models that fit within an actuarial framework that allow them to project out 30, 40 years of welfare payments and welfare structures and work out how to redistribute and structure those benefits. And that sort of concept and work has spread from there, and it's been implemented more broadly. So Australia is going down a similar path. Issues such as social welfare, but also broader social issues. For example, how to improve outcomes and lives of vulnerable children who go through sort of foster care.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, all these examples kind of from the beginning, Rick's example in financial services where you're talking about transparency and governance, which is kind of a board issue, a shareholder issue, right through to where someone's standing in a queue. The point being that data can touch all parts of society. We've talked about what it does. I want to talk about the future of data. And Rick, I'm going to start with you. From a macro perspective, is it a cyclical economy, data? We are going into a slowdown. The US may go into recession. Does that sort of thing matter? So it comes in and out of favour in a sense, depending on whether companies or individuals have money or not.
I think the economy and the weather, the climate, to some extent have cyclical elements, but we as a society trundle along anyway. So we ride through the cycles and we respond to them. What I see, we have two paths with AI. There's a dystopian and a utopian path. The dystopian path, which is one that a lot of people are fearful about, is around the replacement of humans with AI. The better path, I think, is I see data and AI as giving us a great opportunity to optimize human intelligence and artificial intelligence so that each can do their own role better. As part of this, I think our challenge as a society that we're going to be facing over the next 20 and on years is to understand the limitations of computable systems. So I think let's look at wellness of society as the outcome that we're all striving to, and how can we use computable systems to free humans up from more mundane work and allow us to do the more creative work that younger generations, younger than me anyway, and certainly my kids are looking to do.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, we've sort of become more philosophical here, which I think is a really good place to start when we're talking about the future. Do you agree there with Rick?
I guess I do. I think my perspective on this is that you want a combination of computing power and human kind of knowledge and framing the problem in the right way, because what's the problem you're throwing your computer at in the first place? Like, actually, you need to frame the question, and often that is the hardest bit. It's trying to say what am I actually trying to solve here to set a computer up to go and do. So there was an interesting TED talk I saw a few years ago talking about the supercomputers designed to beat the chess grandmasters, and I think there was that first time when a computer beat the grandmaster in chess. And whereas now, I think if you look and you say you've got a strong computer with people who understand chess, that is better than any computer on its own or any grandmaster on its own. And so I think that's kind of the summary to me, is that the combination of humans and machines is better than each on their own in this area.
Yeah. I mean, Jonathan, add to that if you'd like, but I wouldn't mind just shifting a little bit and getting your view on one of the biggest issues facing economies right now and how data and AI can work towards it. And I know your firm's done work in this area, the whole energy transition. It's so high on the national agenda. Is data and analytics being used enough? How can it help society kind of get through that transition?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Look, so energy is not really my area, but I think there's a few places where data and analytics can help a lot. So one is around planning and forecasting. So there's certainly sort of a grand challenge around how do you set up society for transition to renewable energy, particularly when that renewable energy is dependent on the weather in some instances, and on changing demographics and changing nature of demand. For instance, as people shift to electrical cars, placing more strain on the energy grid. So there's techniques around digital twins and simulations, sort of similar to what I touched on with the vaccination centre example, where you can essentially map out and within a computer simulate what those scenarios look like and how you can structure your networks to try to be more resilient to that, particularly in the face of uncertainty around things like weather and climate. And on the other end, we've got sort of an existing energy grid that needs to be maintained and made as efficient as possible, particularly as it ages, and there may be sort of temptations to invest elsewhere. Areas where data and analytics can help there include things like predictive maintenance. So can you identify faults before they occur? So that's something that's been applied in a number of industries. And also, how do you structure your operations to make the most efficient use of the grid? So where do you generate the power and how do you transfer it and so on to be as efficient as possible there?
Yeah. Over the last 12 years in Australia, kind of in response to the floods that we had what I call the Brisbane floods about 12 years ago, the insurance industry in Australia has done an enormous amount of work collecting data on catastrophe exposure. It's that type of data has helped. It puts us in a position as a society to be able to make really sensible decisions about where we should develop and what we should do about existing development. I think that's a really good example of the combination of positive commercial outcomes where insurers are able to make more intelligent decisions, and potentially good societal outcomes where we can build more resilient housing. And just on I do a lot of work in the climate modelling space, and we're doing a lot of mangrove restoration, and it's the collection of data around that means we can have real-time building digital twins, as Jonathan's talking about, of the environment, and we get real-time data so we can respond to, say, salinity and heat on the water levels. I mean, for me, that's really, really exciting, and we're doing it in a particular way where we're combining local Aboriginal knowledge of the systems with this the modern technology and the data capture systems, bringing the human intelligence and the artificial intelligence together. I'm really excited about the opportunity to respond to build systems that will, repair the land.
Yeah, Adam, your thoughts on I mean, I started talking about energy, but really it's about societal benefits that data and analytics can offer. Look,
I think there's a lot. I'll give you a kind of commercial example where there's societal benefits just in the retail space. If you think about something like fresh produce in a retailer, there's a lot of waste that can be in the system if you're not careful about things. So if you can use data to better understand demand so that you're not bringing in too much fresh produce into a store and hence having to potentially throw away produce, that's a good thing. So you kind of eliminate waste in the system. It's good for everyone. If you can get that prediction right, you get the right amount of produce in a store so that it's always fresh for customers. That's a good customer experience. It's also good for the retailer from a profitability point of view, and it's good from a societal point of view in terms of minimising waste. And then to the extent that perhaps there is excess produce that's been produced, I know there's work being done at the moment in different things. I was actually in a meeting yesterday on this topic around, are there ways in which you can use data and technology to then better connect that excess produce with other partners, whether they're charity partners or whether they're other food processors or whoever it might be, so that you are really minimising waste in an area like that. So that's a kind of more commercial example, but there are countless examples where I think data can help with societal benefits.
And I'm staying with you, and I'm shifting topics here. Recent data hacks, data ethics, security issues, very much top of mind for boards and management teams, and much of it on the back of the cybersecurity breaches late last year. What do you think corporate Australia should learn from those recent incidents, Optus, Medibank? What should corporates be learning from those instances?
Yeah, look, I think there's been a few things over the past few years. I think, like you say, you've given examples there of recent cyber incidents, but there's also been other examples of breaches of trust with data, with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook and so on in more recent years. So I think the key thing here is that businesses should be laser focused on the expectations of customers and the trust that customers put in them when they share their data with them. And a customer sharing their data with you is a gift, and it should be treated accordingly. And that means you need to be really transparent with customers around how you are using their data, and make sure you are using their data in their best interest, not against them. And also that you protect that data appropriately. Now, I think as cybercrime continues to increase, it is very, very difficult for a business to completely put a wall around all of their data and never, ever have a breach. I mean, these things are going to become more and more in the news. But as long as companies are doing everything they can to make sure they're not holding data they don't need to, and they're not abusing that trust, then I think that is the key thing for a business to think about.
Jonathan, do you have something to add to that?
I think Adam made a lot of good points there. One thing I think that's changing pretty quickly is consumer expectations around how their data gets used, and there's sort of legislative and regulatory changes that are going to give more control to consumers, both around changes to, say, the Privacy Act and consumer data rights. And so I think organisations that are holding data and using it need to sort of, to Adam's point on trust, start thinking about what gets called fair value exchange. And so fair value exchange is, how do you demonstrate to customers that the value they're giving to you in providing you their data is returned by you in goods and services that you provide to them. So, a good example is around direct marketing. So, a lot of consumers may not be aware about how their data gets used for targeting directed marketing. There's definitely benefits to businesses in doing that. How do you create or demonstrate benefit to consumers? Because in the future, when legislation changes, consumers will be much more able to opt out of those sorts of things.
Okay. On that basis that we're talking about a value exchange here, I'm now going to ask each of you, this is our final question, each of you, what you think is next in data and analytics. Where will we be in 5 years or 10 years as a society because of how data and analytics have been used in society? Perhaps not the easiest question to answer in a sentence, I do get that. But I'm going to go to you first, Jonathan.
I think there's obviously a lot of buzz around what's called generative AI, of which ChatGPT is an example. I think we'll see a lot of growth in systems that help people in the creative process. These have existed for quite a while, but haven't been that known about. That'll expand. I think there'll be a lot of technical advances, but I think one trend that we'll see, particularly over the next 3 to 5 years, is an increase in regulation and guidance on the usage of AI. So there's a number of international developments around setting standards and guidance around the use of AI. There's local developments on several legislative and regulatory fronts to start applying standards there. So I think that'll be an increase in trend, particularly as consumers become more aware of the way in which data and algorithms are affecting decisions that impact their life.
Adam?
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan there in terms of the increase in consumer expectations and governance around the space. I think that's only going to increase over the next, say, 5 years. I think if I add to what Jonathan said, because I agree broadly with what he was saying there, I also just think you're going to see a more mainstream adoption of analytics and data. So, like I said, I think today you're talking about some of the bigger players who are really using analytics at scale to make decisions. So it's a little bit of a case of the haves and the have-nots today, I think. And I think over the next 5 years, you're going to see increasing, almost all companies starting to make much more decisions using data and analytics. Now, obviously, the technology, the range of data that's being captured and the technologies that were being used are only going to explode. They're going to continue to explode. This, we could talk for ages in terms of, whether it's computer vision, whether it's, a smart trolley in a supermarket or whatever it might be in different industries. I think we're going to continue to see explosions in amount of data, the technology to use that data. But I'm really interested to see the broader adoption of data and analytics across companies.
Rick.
I think that if we as a society play our cards right, the data and computable systems will empower the consumer and the individual, and we could start sharing wealth in a lot more equitable ways. I think that these are great tools that can be used for the benefit of society. And I think we've got a bit of imbalance in society at the moment around the beneficiaries being the large institutions, and the government's not acting appropriately and misusing tools. And I think as a society, the power of these tools, they enable individuals to collectivise and not rely on the state so much. And I'm quite excited about that sort of rising up of sort of moral agents. The facilitation by the web and the internet of collective structures to create and demand ownership of your own data, for example, in a way that is not abusive, as I think it has been in the past.
Look, I said that was my last question, but I do have one more. What are your last thoughts about how actuaries and data scientists play a role in what we're talking about going forward? Rick, let's start with you.
I think that as I talk about the two cultures problem that we have these great people who building black algorithms which appear to be black boxes to the boards, the executives, and the ethicists, the academic, or often academic or lawyers or something. And I think the role of the professional issues, the engineers and the actuaries, is to have a foot in both the technical camp and the sort of the governance and ethics camp, and for society to rely on professions such as ours to make sure that the algorithmic output are consistent with corporate and social objectives. And that's the sort of the business offering that we've kind of developed. And I think it's that professional responsibility is our role as actuaries, subject to harsh professional standards, to stand somewhat separate from the outcomes of our work, is how I think society should handle this issue. It's too complex for governments and regulations,
Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say actuaries have an inherent focus on becoming trusted business advisors. And so sort of well placed to help navigate both the huge potential benefits of AI, but also identify and manage the risks associated with that.
And Adam, the last word.
I'm in a bit of a funny situation that I'm an actuary by background, but I run what I think of as a data science company. And so we think about this as a data science problem that, in my opinion, actuaries just make very good data scientists. So when we go about hiring data scientists every year, to give you an idea, we just hired about 150 graduates who start in the next few weeks. A large proportion of those are actuaries. Probably about a third of them are actuarial graduates. And that's because we think they bring the right combination of technical skill set, strategic mindset, financial acumen, and so on. And so there's something about the actuarial course that attracts the right people who've got that combination of skills and also the education that they get. So I actually think it's a data science challenge where actuaries have a role to play. Now, whether in the future the Actuaries Institute can play a broader role to think about how do you, from a governance point of view, introduce more protections and so on, remains to be seen. But today, that's how I see actuaries fitting into the piece.
Whatever, it's a very exciting future for actuaries, I suspect. Adam Driussi, co-founder and CEO of Quantium, thank you for your time today.
No problems. Thanks, Sean. Jonathan
Cohen, principal at Taylor Fry, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, Sean.
And Deloitte partner, Rick Shaw, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks a lot.
It's a very exciting future. If you're interested in more information about how actuaries can help you, head to dodatabetter.com.au. I'm Sean Aylmer, and this is Do Data Better.
2 words, Revo Fitness. Here's a few more. Simple, 24/7, reformer Pilates, body scanners, massage chairs, squat racks, free weights, pin and plate loaded equipment, no lock-in contracts, no bullshit. All of that and more from just $9.69 a week. That's surprisingly affordable. Join now at Revo Fitness Blair Athol or download the Revo Fitness app. RevoFitness.com.au or find the Revo Fitness app in the App Store.